They say some women dream of walking down the aisle, but what if I told you that the night before her wedding, a bride-to-be uncovered a truth so devastating it sent her running into the dark? One man promised her forever while secretly planning a future with another woman. He swore she was the love of his life, yet behind closed doors, he admitted she was nothing more than a safe choice. And when his secret came out, it wasn't him who stood humiliated. It was her entire family, left with unanswered invitations and an empty church. Would you forgive someone who used your heart as a bargaining chip? Or would you disappear, leaving everything behind, just to find out who you truly are without them? Stay with me, because this story will make you question how far you'd go to protect your dignity. And if you've ever faced betrayal, I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. The lace of the dress felt heavier than I imagined. As I stood in front of the mirror at the boutique in Charleston, my mother's eyes glistened. She smoothed the veil over my shoulder with hands that trembled as if she were holding her own dream. "You look like an angel," she whispered, her voice breaking. I smiled, or at least I thought I did, though the corners of my mouth fought against the weight inside my chest. Around us, attendants bustled with pins and clips, pulling fabric this way and that, while soft piano music floated from a hidden speaker. To them, I was a princess about to step into a fairy tale. To me, the room was spinning with questions I couldn't answer. The boutique owner asked about the flowers, and my mother quickly answered with excitement, describing the ivory roses we had chosen. She mentioned the cake, the guest list, the way 40 people would rise to their feet as soon as the music started. My phone buzzed in my hand, and Daniel's name flashed across the screen. I answered, his voice smooth as silk. "Tomorrow will be perfect," he said. "I can't wait to show you what I've planned for us." My mother's face lit up as if she had overheard a promise meant for her too. I pressed the phone to my ear, nodding, murmuring agreement, though my throat tightened until each word felt forced. As the call ended, I caught my own reflection once more. The girl in the mirror wore the dress of every little girl's dream, yet her eyes betrayed her. Wide, uncertain, shadows flickering where joy should be. My mother clapped her hands and said, "This is it, Emily. This is your moment." The words fell over me like confetti that never touched the ground. For a heartbeat, I imagined walking down that aisle, Daniel waiting, the crowd smiling, and yet beneath the music and lace and perfume, there was a silence only I could hear, one that whispered a warning I didn't yet understand. The rain had stopped by the time I pulled into Daniel's driveway, but the air still carried that heavy scent of thunder. I had come to drop off the cufflink he left behind at the boutique, a tiny silver piece that now burned in my palm as though it already knew its role in what was about to unfold. The house glowed with warm lights, voices drifting faintly through the cracks of the front door. I hesitated, one foot on the porch, the other rooted to the step below. Something inside me urged caution, though I couldn't yet name the reason. I lifted my hand to knock, but a voice, his voice, stopped me cold. Daniel was speaking low, steady, the way he always did when he wanted to sound in control. "Emily is dependable," he said. "She'll keep everything steady. Our families can build together. With her, the future is secure." My chest tightened. There was no tenderness in his tone, only calculation. My fingers curled around the cufflink, pressing its edge into my skin as if pain could prove I was still awake. Then another voice, his mother's, gentle yet sharp. "But what about Madison, Daniel?" she asked. The sound of that name struck me harder than the storm outside. Silence followed, a silence so long it became unbearable. Finally, Daniel sighed. "She's the one I'll always love. But she's not safe. She's not the kind of woman you build a legacy with. That's why I'm marrying Emily. She's the right choice, even if my heart isn't there."
The cufflink slipped from my hand, clattering against the wooden porch. I froze, praying no one inside heard, but the voices continued as if the world hadn't just ended on the other side of that door. His father spoke next, pragmatic and cold. As long as you don't get careless, no one has to know. Appearances matter more than feelings. You'll learn to live with it. I pressed my back against the wall, every muscle trembling. My nails dug into my palm, searching for something solid, but all I found was betrayal. The wedding dress I had tried on just hours ago flashed in my mind. The veil, the smile on my mother's face, all of it, nothing more than a backdrop for a lie I hadn't agreed to live. I took one step back, then another, until I reached the bottom stair. My throat burned with the scream I couldn't release. I wanted to burst through that door, to demand answers, to shatter the illusion right there in front of them. But my legs carried me the opposite way, down the driveway, toward the street where shadows hid my tears. The cufflink still lay on the porch, a tiny piece of silver reflecting the porch light. I imagined Daniel finding it, perhaps later that night, perhaps wondering if I had been there. A part of me wanted him to know, wanted him to feel the fear of being exposed, but another part knew that tonight wasn't about him. It was about me, realizing that the love I thought was mine had never truly belonged to me at all. By the time I reached my car, the storm inside had broken loose. My hands shook so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. When the engine roared to life, I stared at the house one last time. Behind those walls, the man I was supposed to marry was planning a future built on lies. And out here, in the dark silence of my own unraveling, I finally understood that tomorrow would not be my wedding day.
I shut the door to my bedroom with a force that rattled the frame. The house was silent, but inside me there was a storm, louder than the thunder had ever been. My dress hung in the corner, still draped across the chair where I had left it earlier that afternoon. In the soft glow of the bedside lamp, the lace shimmered like it was mocking me, daring me to put it on and play the part of a bride who believed in fairy tales. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my breath jagged, my palms pressed to my face as if I could block out what I had just heard. I could still hear his voice echoing through the wood of that door. Emily is safe. Emily is steady. Madison is love. Each word landed heavier than the last, crushing the picture I had painted of us. The cufflink was gone, abandoned on his porch, but the weight of it still pressed against my hand. I curled my fingers, remembering the sting when I dug its edge into my skin. Proof that this was real. Proof that he had chosen me for everything but love. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. His name lit up the screen. For a long moment, I just stared at it, watching the letters blur through my tears. I wanted to answer, to scream, to demand why I was never enough. Instead, I let it ring until the silence returned, more suffocating than before. My mother's voice drifted from the kitchen downstairs, humming as she prepared breakfast for tomorrow's big day. She had no idea that the celebration she dreamed of was already in ashes. I pulled open the drawer of my desk and found a blank piece of stationery. My hand trembled as I picked up a pen. For minutes, I stared at the page, the ink hovering over the white surface. Finally, I began to write. The words spilled out, raw and uneven. I can't do this. I can't marry a man who doesn't love me. Please forgive me. By the time I set the pen down, the page was damp with tears, the letters smudged, but the message clear. The clock ticked toward midnight. I walked over to the chair, brushing my hand across the dress. My mother's voice replayed in my head. You look like an angel. I wanted to believe her, but angels don't wear chains disguised as lace. My fingers tightened, and I turned away before the fabric could pull me back into its illusion. I folded the note,
slid it under my jewelry box, where she would find it, and sat back down on the bed. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Tomorrow, when the music played and the guests filled their seats, they would wait for a bride who would never walk through those doors. I lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling, my body trembling from exhaustion, my mind racing with fear and defiance, colliding in equal measure. Somewhere in the darkness between tonight and tomorrow, I knew a choice had been made. The first light of morning crept through the blinds, but I had not slept a single second. My suitcase sat open at the foot of the bed, half packed with clothes shoved inside without thought for order. Each zipper pull sounded like a final decision, like a nail closing off the life I had almost stepped into. I folded the letter once more, pressing it beneath the jewelry box, and whispered a prayer my mother would find it before the guests began to arrive. The silence of the house was too much to bear. I slipped my shoes on quietly, careful not to let the floorboards creak. Every sound felt dangerous, every step a betrayal of the family still dreaming 2 rooms away. My hand shook as I pulled the front door open, and the morning air hit my face like a verdict. The street was still damp from last night's storm. Puddles mirrored the pastel glow of the sunrise, but there was no beauty in it for me, only urgency. I dragged my suitcase down the steps, the wheels clattering against the stone, a noise far too loud in a world still asleep. I imagined my mother stirring, hearing it, rushing to the window, but no curtain moved. My phone buzzed again and again in my pocket. Friends, bridesmaids, Daniel. Their names scrolled across the screen like ghosts clawing to pull me back. I turned it off, the black screen a mercy. At the station, the clerk barely glanced at me as I asked for a one-way ticket to New York. His hands tapped at the keyboard, indifferent to the fact that he was sealing the end of one life and the uncertain start of another. I held the ticket in both hands, the paper shaking like it might slip away if I loosened my grip. People bustled around me, some laughing, some half awake, but none of them knew I was leaving behind a wedding dress, a chapel, a groom waiting in a lie. I sank into a seat on the bus, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. The suitcase sat in the rack above me, heavier with the weight of my choice than with anything inside it. As the engine roared, my heart pounded to match. The bus lurched forward, tires hissing against the wet pavement. I watched Charleston slide away, brick by brick, until it blurred into trees and shadows. Guilt rose like a tide. I pictured the guests arriving, women in pastel dresses, men adjusting ties, whispers starting as the minutes passed and no bride appeared. I saw my mother's face when she read the letter, her hand trembling, her voice breaking. I pressed my fist against my mouth, swallowing the sob that threatened to shatter me. The bus picked up speed. I forced myself to breathe, in and out, steady as the rows of telephone poles flashing by. I had walked away from the safety of certainty into the abyss of the unknown. And yet, in that hollow ache of loss, there was something else. A flicker, small but alive, whispering that I had chosen truth, even if it cost me everything. The bus ride felt endless, but when the skyline of New York finally rose against the gray morning, my heart lurched as if the city itself had been waiting to swallow me whole. I stepped onto the pavement with one small suitcase and a body that ached from the weight of no sleep. The streets were alive with honking cars and rushing footsteps, and for a moment I stood frozen, a stranger in a place that didn't know my name. I found a room above a laundromat in Queens. The walls were thin, the radiator groaned, and the bed sagged beneath me, but it was mine. I sat on the edge of it that first night, staring at the single bulbs swinging from the ceiling, and whispered to myself, "You're free." The word felt both powerful and terrifying. Days blurred into each other. I lived on cheap noodles and coffee that tasted like ash. Each morning, I carried my old laptop to the corner cafe, its screen cracked, its battery dying, but still a lifeline. I filled out applications, typed out cover letters that sounded more desperate than professional, sent them into the void, and waited. Most never replied. Some answered only to tell me no. One afternoon, after hours of silence, I was called into an interview for a retail job. The manager barely looked up when I entered. His eyes swept across me, then down to my resume. "You've been a bride who ran away from her wedding?" he said flatly, as if the gossip had somehow followed me here. My face burned, though I hadn't told a soul. I stammered something about wanting a fresh start, but he only shook his head, muttering that the job required stability, not drama. I walked out into the street, the rejection echoing louder than the traffic around me. Back in my small room, I sat cross-legged on the floor, my laptop balanced on my knees. The screen glowed in the dark, each job posting another door I was pounding on with bloodied hands. I typed until my fingers cramped, tailoring words, cutting sentences, selling myself as if I were both product and advertiser. Midnight came and went, but I couldn't stop. The hum of the washing machines below seeped through the floor, a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I caught my reflection in the window, the city lights scattered behind me. My hair was messy, my eyes hollow, but there was a fire I hadn't seen before. The woman in that glass wasn't the bride who waited for a man's promise. She was someone clawing her way into existence with nothing but willpower. The next morning, I tightened the laces on my shoes and stepped out into the noise again. The air smelled of exhaust and hot pretzels, of opportunity and risk. I clutched a folder of resumes to my chest like armor. Somewhere in this city, a door would open. I just had to keep knocking until my knuckles bled.
It was nearly 3 weeks before one company finally called me back. A mid-sized marketing firm tucked into a glass building near Times Square agreed to bring me in for an interview. I remember gripping the straps of my bag so tight my knuckles turned white as I stepped into the lobby. The receptionist barely looked up when she handed me a badge. My reflection in the elevator door showed a woman who looked too fragile for this city, yet she refused to look away. The interview was short. They didn't seem impressed with my thin resume, but one manager glanced at me, then at the pile of paperwork on his desk and said, 3-month probation. Prove you can handle it. I nodded quickly, thanking him, though my voice cracked. The next morning, I showed up at 7:30 a.m., hours before most of the staff arrived. The first weeks were brutal. I missed deadlines, misunderstood instructions, spilled coffee across a draft proposal, and once sent an email to the wrong client that nearly cost the firm a deal. My supervisor, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, pulled me aside and said, "If you can't toughen up, you won't last here." I bit my lip, nodded, and swallowed the tears that burned to get out. At night, I stayed long after everyone left, combing through old files, teaching myself what I didn't know, determined not to be the girl who ran from her own wedding only to fail in New York. One evening, as I sat surrounded by crumpled notes and glowing screens, a voice broke the silence. "You should go home," it said. I looked up and saw Ethan Miller, a colleague from the creative team, leaning against the doorway. He wasn't mocking me. His tone carried something closer to concern. "You'll burn out if you keep this up," he added. I forced a smile and told him I couldn't afford to stop. He nodded once and left me to it. But the next morning, he quietly slid a stack of reference guides onto my desk without a word. Slowly, things began to shift. I learned to anticipate mistakes before they happened, to ask the right questions, to catch details others overlooked. My proposals grew sharper, my pitches steadier. The first time a client praised my work, I nearly broke down in the restroom, clutching the sink as if the words might dissolve if I let them go. When the 3 months ended, the entire staff gathered for the weekly meeting. I sat in the back, bracing myself for rejection. My supervisor adjusted her glasses, scanned the room, and then said, "Emily Parker has completed her probation. She's now part of the team." The room clapped politely, but to me it was thunder. My chest tightened, my throat ached, and I fought to keep my tears from spilling over. I had built something no one could take away from me, not even him.
It was a Tuesday morning when I saw him again. I had just come back from grabbing a cup of coffee downstairs, the steam curling from the lid, when the elevator doors slid open and there he was, standing in the lobby of my office building as if he had every right to be there. Daniel. His suit was pressed, his tie perfect, and in his hands he held a bouquet of white roses so large it looked ridiculous against the marble floor. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My fingers tightened around the paper cup until it bent in my hand. "Emily," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. Heads turned. A few of my coworkers paused at the sight of him, then quickly hurried past, whispering. My stomach dropped. The last thing I wanted was a scene, but Daniel was never one to care about who was watching. He walked toward me, holding out the flowers like a shield. "I've been looking for you," he said. "I had to see you." My throat tightened. I forced a breath and motioned him to follow me into one of the small conference rooms. The door clicked shut behind us, cutting off the noise of the office, leaving only the heavy sound of my heartbeat. He set the bouquet on the table. "I made a mistake," he said quickly. "I let my pride, my fear, everything get in the way. But I see it clearly now. You're the one I should have chosen from the start. Forget what I said that night. It didn't mean anything." I stared at him, at the desperation behind his polished exterior. "Didn't mean anything?" I repeated slowly. My voice didn't shake this time. I leaned forward, resting my palms against the table, forcing him to meet my eyes. "I was standing at your door, Daniel. I heard every word. I heard you tell them that Madison was the one you'd always love, and I was just safe." Color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed, searching for a defense. "I was under pressure. My parents." "No," I cut him off. "Those words were yours. You can't take them back." My chest rose and fell, but my voice grew steadier. "Do you know what it felt like? Hearing the man I was supposed to marry talk about me like a business deal?" He flinched. For the first time, I saw his confidence crack. He looked smaller, as if the weight of his own choices had finally caught up with him. "I can be different," he whispered. "Give me another chance." I shook my head. The roses between us had begun to shed petals across the polished wood. I picked one up, twirled it between my fingers, then let it drop. "You had your chance, and you showed me exactly who you are." I walked past him, opened the door, and stepped back into the hum of the office. The bouquet remained on the table, petals scattered like the promises he had broken. I didn't look back. That evening, after the chaos of the day had drained away, Ethan stopped by my desk. He didn't ask about the flowers still sitting in the conference room or the whispers that had passed like wildfire through the office. He simply tilted his head toward the door and said, "Come on, let's get some air." His tone carried no judgment, no pity, only steadiness. We walked down the crowded streets of Manhattan until the glow of a small cafe appeared on the corner. The air smelled of roasted beans and rain-soaked pavement. Inside, the hum was softer, a refuge from the sharp edges of the city. We found a table near the window, the glass fogged by the warmth inside. Ethan ordered 2 coffees without asking what I wanted, as if he already knew. For a long moment, I stared at the steam curling from the cup. My hands shook as I wrapped them around the mug, the heat seeping into my fingers. "He came here today, with roses, with words he thought I wanted to hear." My voice faltered, and for a second, I almost believed him. Ethan leaned back, his eyes steady, not rushing me, not filling the silence. "Almost," he said quietly. I nodded, but then I remembered his voice that night, the way he said my name like it was a contract, not a vow. I can't unhear it. The cafe around us blurred, laughter from other tables fading into a distant hum. I let the words tumble out. The bus ride, the sleepless nights, the endless rejections, the way I had clawed my way into this job just to prove I was more than what he left behind. Ethan listened, his hands folded, his gaze never shifting. When I finally stopped, when the flood of words had emptied me out, he spoke. "You don't have to prove anything. Not to me, not to him, not to anyone. You're already standing on your own 2 feet. That's enough." The simplicity of it nearly undid me. My throat tightened, but this time the tears that filled my eyes weren't born of betrayal. They carried something gentler, something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Outside, the city moved without pause. Cars honked, neon signs flickered, people hurried past the window. Inside, time felt slower. I lifted my cup, took a sip, and felt the warmth spread through me, quieting the storm that had lived in my chest since Charleston. When we left, the air was cool, the streets glistening under streetlights. We walked side by side, not touching, not speaking, and yet in that silence, I realized something had shifted. The shadow of Daniel's words no longer held me captive. For the first time, the weight was lifting. As we reached the corner where our paths would part, Ethan glanced at me, his expression calm but certain. "You'll be okay," he said. I believed him. For the first time, I truly did. A year had passed before I found myself back in Charleston. The cities smelled the same, warm air thick with magnolias and salt drifting from the harbor. I had returned from my mother's birthday, carrying a bouquet of lilies she loved, my footsteps slow as I climbed the porch steps. Inside, family voices rose in laughter, but I could feel the way their eyes lingered a second too long, whispers sliding just beneath the surface. The runaway bride had come home, and though time had dulled the scandal, its echo was still there. That evening, I slipped away to a small cafe on King Street, the same one where I had studied during college. Its walls still bore faded photographs of the city. Its booths still smelled faintly of cinnamon. I ordered tea and settled into a corner, watching raindrops tap against the glass. That's when the door opened, and I saw them. Daniel walked in first, his hand firmly holding another's. Madison followed close, her smile practiced but genuine enough to sting. My chest tightened as I watched the glint of wedding bands on both their hands. They spotted me almost instantly. His eyes widened, hers softened. For a heartbeat, the three of us stood frozen in that narrow space between past and present. Madison was the first to move. She approached my table, her tone careful. "Emily, it's been a long time. You look well." Her fingers brushed the edge of her ring absent-mindedly, a gesture that said more than words. Daniel hovered behind her, his expression unreadable, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed something. Regret, perhaps? Or shame? He started to speak, then stopped, the words trapped in his throat. I held my cup with steady hands, though my pulse hammered beneath my skin. "Congratulations," I said, letting the syllables hang in the air. My voice didn't shake. "I hope you're both happy." Madison nodded, relief flickering across her face. "We are," she said quietly. Daniel shifted, as if the word cut him, but he didn't correct her. The silence stretched, heavy with everything unspoken. Then, slowly, they turned and left me to my tea, their figures retreating into the evening rain. I stared down at the table, the steam from my cup curling upward. My reflection in the glass wasn't the same woman who had fled Charleston in tears. My spine straightened, my breath evened. The sight of them together no longer crushed me. It freed me. When I stepped back onto the street, the rain had slowed to a mist, soft against my skin. Lights from the shops blurred into golden streaks along the wet pavement. I walked alone, yet lighter than I had in months. In that moment, I understood. I had not just left Daniel behind. I had left behind the girl who thought her worth depended on him. Back in New York, the city greeted me with its restless heartbeat, neon lights flickering against the night sky. I unlocked the door to my apartment, the sound echoing in the narrow hallway, and stepped inside to find Ethan already there. He had picked up takeout from the diner around the corner, the smell of fries and coffee filling the air. No champagne, no roses, no spectacle. Just a paper bag set neatly on the table and his easy smile waiting for me. We ate from the cartons, our elbows brushing on the small kitchen counter. He asked about Charleston, but not about Daniel. He never pressed for details I wasn't ready to give. Instead, he listened as I spoke about my mother's birthday, the way my family's laughter had filled the house, how the whispers had finally faded into something softer. He nodded, not interrupting, his presence steady as stone. After dinner, we carried our coffee to the balcony. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain on steel and pavement. Below us, traffic hummed and horns blared, the city moving in its relentless rhythm. I leaned against the railing, staring at the skyline, the towers lit like beacons. Ethan stood beside me, his hands resting casually in his pockets. We didn't need to fill the silence. I thought of the girl I had been a year ago, the one in Charleston, draped in lace, waiting for a man to tell her she was enough. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone who had walked through betrayal, through hunger, through rejection, and had found herself on the other side, not broken, but rebuilt. Ethan glanced at me then, his expression quiet but certain. "You seem lighter," he said. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "I am," I answered, and I meant it. We stood there for a long time, the city stretching wide before us. His hand brushed against mine, not claiming, not demanding, simply offering. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to question it. I laced my fingers with his, steady and sure. I lifted my gaze to the skyline once more, the windows glowing like 1,000 possibilities. My voice was soft, almost to myself. I didn't run away from a wedding. I ran toward my freedom. The words hung in the air, swallowed by the hum of the city, but I felt them settle inside me like truth. And that's what I want you to remember. Don't let the promise of safety chain you to something that doesn't honor your heart. Freedom is worth the risk, even when it terrifies you. If this story has touched something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe in stories of resilience and hope, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below. They matter more than you know.